Roccia Mamma Mia'd onto the roster, and she actually deals a lot of damage. But how do you use her, you ask? Don't worry, because in this video I will show you how to build and use Roccia. Roccia is a Havok sub DPS wielding gauntlets whilst buffing Havok and basic attack damage. First, let's talk about her Forte circuit, since this is the primary way of dealing damage and building up Concerto energy. Roccia's Forte consists of 3 stacks. Each stack is 100 Forte points, and each stack will count as 1 suitcase attack. These suitcase attacks deal a good amount of damage in a big AoE, with each subsequent hit dealing a bit more damage than the last. But how do you build these stacks? The first way is by using your intro skill. This will grant you 100 Forte points whilst allowing you to start your basic attack rotation at basic attack 4. The second way is by dealing damage using basic attacks. The third is by holding your charge attack. This will slowly charge your Forte points as long as you hold it. And finally, the fourth way is by using your resonance skill. This will recover 100 Forte points. Okay, now that you've built up 3 Forte stacks, how do you use these suitcase attacks? Well, to use these suitcase attacks, you need to enter the Beyond Imagination state. This can be acquired in a couple different ways. The first will be by using your resonance skill. And the second is by releasing your heavy attack. Once you've been launched into the air by either one of these attacks, you can use your basic attack button to plunge down, dealing good amount of damage in an AoE. And every time you still have a stack after the previous suitcase attack, Roccia will launch back up into the air, allowing you to use another suitcase attack. Okay, now that we know how to use her Forte, let's talk about the rest of her kit. First up will be her basic attacks. Roccia has a 4-hit basic attack combo. These hits deal a bit of damage whilst also generating Forte points. The 4th attack will generate 100 Forte points. Finally, her charge attack. You can hold this attack, and whilst holding, you'll consume 15 stamina per second whilst also charging up your Forte points. Once you let go, Roccia will dash forward, and when she hits an enemy whilst having at least 1 Forte stack, she will fly up and enter the Beyond Imagination state. Next up is her Resonance skill. It's quite a simple ability. Once pressed, you will turn into a tornado, pulling in nearby enemies whilst gaining 100 Forte points. After the tornado has ended, Roccia will be launched into the air and activates the Beyond Imagination state. And finally, for her Resonance Liberation.
The world is our stage.
Commedia Improviso. This is a 3-hit AoE nuke, dealing heavy attack Havok damage. Once she casts her Liberation, she will buff the entire team, granting 1 attack for every 0.1 crit rate she owns over 50% for 30 seconds. This is a maximum of 200 stacks. This ability has a low 125 resonance energy requirement, whilst having a 20-second cooldown. Now, let's go over to her intro and outro skills. First up, her intro skill. This will deal a bit of damage, granting 100 Forte points, whilst letting Roccia start at basic attack 4 to instantly gain another 100 Forte points. As for her outro skill, Roccia will increase the incoming Resonator's Havok damage by 20% and their basic attack damage by 25% for 14 seconds, or when the Resonator switches off the field. As for the last part of her abilities, let's talk about her inherent skills. The first will increase Roccia's attack by 20% for 12 seconds after using her intro or heavy attack. As for the second, when Roccia uses her outro skill, she will grant the incoming Resonator a gadget. When you use the gadget, a suitcase will appear, pulling enemies towards it whilst dealing 100 Havok damage. Before you use the suitcase, it will last for 14 seconds or when the Resonator is swapped off the field. For her leveling recommendations, I recommend leveling her Forte circuit first, followed by her Resonance Liberation. Her Forte circuit is most of her damage, so leveling this will let you deal a significant amount of damage more. As for Liberation, it is a big nuke, so you can't really go wrong with leveling this. After this, you can level her Resonance skill, which is a good amount of damage and you'll use this every rotation. And finally, you can level her intro skill and basic attacks. Roccia has 6 weapons she can use in total, so let's check them out. The first will be her signature weapon, the Tragicomedy. It has high base attack and a decent amount of crit rate. This is nice, since her liberation wants her to have at least 70% crit rate. As for the passive, first it increases her attack by 12%, and every time Roccia casts her intro skill or basic attack, she will increase her heavy attack damage bonus by 48% for 3 seconds. This is a pretty good buff, since her suitcase attacks count as basic attacks whilst dealing heavy attack damage. Next up is the Verity's Handle, GHIBLI Yao's signature weapon. This also has a high base attack with a decent amount of crit rate. However, the passive doesn't help much. First, you gain 12% attribute damage bonus. As for the second part, when you use your liberation, you will gain 48% liberation damage bonus for 5 seconds. This can be extended by 5 seconds if you use a resonance skill, which stacks up to 3 times. However, Roccia doesn't deal liberation damage, so this will completely go to waste, making the weapon just a stat stick with some attribute damage bonus. For the final 5-star option, we have the Abyss Surges. These gauntlets have high base attack and a decent amount of attack percent. As for its passive, it increases your energy regeneration by 12.8%, whilst granting basic attack damage bonus when you hit a skill, and skill damage bonus when you hit a basic attack. The passive is pretty useless except for the energy regen, but the high base attack and attack percent are pretty good for Roccia. Now for the 4-star options. First, we have the Stone Art, the Battle Pass exclusive weapon. It has decent base attack with a surprisingly good amount of crit rate. However, the passive does boost liberation damage bonus, so just like GHIBLI Yao's signature weapon, Verity's Handle, this will be just a stat stick. The problem with Roccia is that she needs 70% crit rate to function as a full build support. So getting this crit rate on her weapon is almost necessary to reach that 70% cap for her buffs. For the second 4-star option, we have the Celestial Spiral. With high base attack and a low attack percent subset, this weapon is already pretty nice. And with its passive granting resonance energy and attack percent when you cast a skill, this weapon will be quite nice for Roccia. For the final weapon, we have the Marsados. It has a low attack but high energy recharge. For the passive, when you use your skill, you will gain 8 Concerto energy. Roccia doesn't struggle with energy recharge or Concerto energy buildup. So I wanna only recommend this weapon if you don't have any other of the aforementioned ones. This is just a free to play option since all the other ones were, well, even worse I would say. For the TLDR, her signature weapon, the Tragicomedy, will be the best in slot for Roccia. This is because her kit is pretty specific, since most of the gauntlets give liberation damage boost or energy or Concerto regen. So I recommend picking one of the crit rate substat weapons if you cannot reach the 70% crit rate.
The world is our stage.
As for the Echo set, I recommend the new Renascida release Midnight Veil set. This set increases both the wielders and the incoming resonators damage. The 2-piece will increase Roccia's Havok damage by 10%. As for the 5-piece, first it will give Roccia a second outro skill damage hit, dealing 480% Havok damage in an AoE. As for the second part, it will increase the incoming resonator's Havok damage bonus by 15%. This set is perfect for Roccia, letting her deal more damage as well as still buffing her teammates. For the active Echo, I recommend the Nightmare version of the Impermanence Heron. This Echo grants 12% Havok damage bonus, as well as 12% heavy attack damage bonus for just having it equipped in your active Echo slot. For the actual ability, it spins around dealing a bit of Havok damage in an AoE for about 10 times. For the main stats, I recommend crit on the forecost, with a preference to crit rate if you can't reach 70%. Havok damage bonus on the free cost, and attack percent on the one cost. You could also run a 4-4-1-1-1, since this way you will definitely reach the 70% crit rate, but you will lose out on quite a bit of damage on Roccia. For the substats, I recommend crit rate, crit damage, heavy attack damage bonus, attack percent, and finally, some energy recharge can't hurt.
Unexpected plot twist.
Roccia has 3 different teammates you can use at the moment. The first and the best option will be Camellia. Camellia pretty much only deals Havok basic attack damage. The only thing is, Sanwa is competition. Overall, Roccia will be a bit better than Sanwa in this team. And if we're gonna consider sequences from Roccia, like 1 and 2, she will be much better than Sanwa. Next up is Havok Rover. Havok Rover deals damage in multiple ways: basic attacks, skill, and liberation. Her grouping also helps a lot, since Rover doesn't have much grouping herself. And finally, we have main DPS Danjin. Danjin deals Havok heavy attack damage with a bit of skill damage. Her biggest damage, which is her charge attack, deals a lot of damage in an AoE. So, Roccia's grouping ability is really nice for Danjin, letting her hit the most amount of enemies with her charged attack. For her standard rotation, it'll be an intro skill into a basic attack, granting you a total of 200 Forte points. Then, you use your skill for the final 100 points. Then, once in the air in the Beyond Imagination state, you can either hold your basic attack button or click it 3 times to use your suitcase attacks. Then, use your Liberation and Echo and swap to your main DPS. I'll need some more time with Roccia to find the best rotations for her and Camellia. So, stay tuned for that video. Let's take a look at her sequences. Her first sequence will grant Roccia 100 extra Forte points when using her skill, as well as 10 Concerto energy. And, besides this, she will also gain interruption resistance for her suitcase attacks. Overall, this doesn't increase her damage, but it's a couple of quality of life changes. S2 will grant the entire team 10% Havok damage bonus for every suitcase attack Roccia does. These stacks will last for 30 seconds and have a limit of 3 stacks. Once you reach 3 stacks, Roccia will increase the Havok damage of the entire team by an additional 10%. This is pretty good for a Havok main DPS, granting quite a bit more damage for them, as well as for Roccia herself. S3 will increase Roccia's crit rate by 10% and crit damage by 30% after casting her intro skill. This is pretty good, increasing her own damage by quite a bit whilst making you able to stack more crit damage and maybe even enabling you to easily use a crit damage forecast. S4 increases the damage multiplier of her suitcase attacks by 60% after using her resonance skill. This is quite nice, giving her a good damage increase. S5 increases her liberation damage by 20% and her heavy attacks damage by 80%. These are fine, but pretty small buffs, so this is one of her worst sequences. And finally, S6. After casting her liberation, you gain the following effects. First, her suitcase attacks ignore 60% defense. And second, when Roccia lands after performing her suitcase attack number 3, she is launched into mid-air, allowing her to do another suitcase attack dealing 100% of her suitcase attack number 3. And lastly, when Roccia lands, she will be launched back into the air and allows herself to use another suitcase attack. I think Roccia looks and plays amazing. Her fast-paced suitcase attacks are fun to use and her tornado makes her really nice as a sub DPS. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, may I recommend the video on the screen right now. I appreciate you all. Bye bye.